Wow.
Wow. This is
Wow. Ali Gamsari. Ali Gamsari is the name of the
so
artist.
powerful and beautiful human being. And he was the one who was recently protecting with his body the nuclear power plant in Iran that was threatened by the war. So welcome.
Safarini.
Well,
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for being with us. It's a joy and an honor to have you with us. My name is Maurizio Benazzo.
My name is Aya Benazzo.
And we gather today in this event under the title of What Empire Cannot Erase, Persian Poetry and Civilization.
And we're living in moments, in times where the destructive machinery of empire is devastatingly visible. We watch with heavy hearts the brutal wars unfolding against people, land, and memories of people. Israel and US have been targeting schools, libraries, universities, sacred sites, and the ancient threads of history. So today here we're gathering to sit with both the grief and the beauty, refusing to hold one without the other. And we're here to embrace the complexity that we need to distinguish between governments and peoples and find the language, vocabulary, or remember the language of resistance against domination and injustice.
And guiding the conversation today with us is Dr. Imad, a dear friend, an Iraqi immigrant. Mace is a neuroscientist and a researcher and teaches about trauma and repair through the lens of the embodied nervous system. She's interested in democratizing knowledge and the question of epistemic justice and liberation in and through education. Welcome, Mace. Always a joy to see you, even though it's not in person.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I've asked to start with the voice from Iran, different voice, also music, and we're gonna start with that. If my colleague at Sand would put that video. This is a video of a music teacher who refuses to let the last thing from his school be the bombardment and the rubble, and instead he sits there, as you see, and he plays his beautiful instrument. So I want to begin by thanking Sand for their continued moral clarity and consistency to hold this space for all of us. I want to thank you for joining us. I can imagine it's a busy Sunday, and for you to take the time to be in community with all of us. I also want to begin by saying that in this conversation, I come to it not as a neutral moderator. As Maurizio says, I am an Iraqi immigrant who lived through wars and displacement and watching the destruction and the occupation of my homeland. And so I'm holding the conversation from that place of grief. I'm holding it with urgency and with deep respect and reverence for language, for poetry, for stories. And we gather today, there is urgency, as I said, and there is moral reckoning and so much love. So much love, I want to emphasize. The war continues to devastate Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, and much of the broader Arab world. And I am, as many of you are, devastated by witnessing yet again what empires do, the terrible cost of human violence. I keep thinking about the birds, the land of Attar. And the birds, are they able to converse? Are they able to tell their stories in the middle of the war and the burning of oil fields and on and on? And shocked by the enduring habits of empire, the ways powers justify domination and erasure and displacement, and really the normalization of senseless suffering. And yet, in the middle of this, poetry remains. Poetry feels. I keep thinking about how poetry witnesses, and even the hair on our arms, our limbs stand up to witness. Poetry as memory, poetry as resistance, and refusal to let the language be colonized by propaganda or fear or forgetting. It's been helping me and the work of our two esteemed colleagues here. Their poetry has been helping me name what is trying to be destroyed and cannot be destroyed, and imagine ways of new forms of dignity and solidarity that will outlast militarism. So we are deeply fortunate and grateful to be joined by two extraordinary scholars and public intellectuals whose beautiful work help us think across literature and history and spirituality and justice and the enduring human struggle to remain fully alive in the face of violence. Professor Fatemeh Keshavarz Fatemeh Jan is the Roshan Chair in Persian Language and Literature at the University of Maryland and the director of the Roshan Institute for Persian Studies. A distinguished scholar of Persian literature, her work has illuminated the depth, the beauty, the power, the humanity of Iranian cultural and poetic traditions for audiences around the world. Professor Omid Jan is the professor of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University, a scholar of Islamic mysticism and contemporary Islamic thought, and a widely respected and sought-after public intellectual whose work brings together spirituality, justice, and historical reflection. I've asked both of them to join us and to share their reflections on the current moment and how, if even possible, you are making sense or sitting with this current moment. And so I will begin with Professor Fatemeh, or actually, I didn't rehearse this. Who would like to go first?
Omid, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Mace. And what a great joy, pleasure, and honor to be back again with the SAND community, and a special privilege to be with my dear friend and beloved teacher, Ustad, Fatemeh Keshavarz. And friends, as Mays mentioned, we are living in an age which call for everything that we can muster with our hearts, with our souls, with our intellect, with our voice, with our bodies. We live in an age where bombast seems to have the upper hand. But as the great Persian poet Sadi says, the drum is so loud because it's hollow. whereas the perfume seller doesn't need to shout about how fragrant his wares are. And our Iranian friends, of which both I and Fatemeh come from, we have no monopoly on goodness, on beauty, on love, on courage. And this is not an exercise for us to have to prove something that's already a given, mainly our very humanity. But if you're watching the news and you hear an unhinged madman, the naked king, openly boast about committing civilizational genocide and wiping an entire civilization off the face of the planet, it is time for moral clarity. Our voice might shake, but it is time to speak with openness, with compassion, and with courage, remembering that courage ultimately comes from the heart. And this is not the first time that people of this region have had to do so. Remember that our beloved Hazrat Maulana Rumi, he lived at a time where about 10% of the world's population in that part of the world was wiped out by the Mongol onslaught. 10%. If you want to put this in today's terms, that would mean an atrocity of almost 800 million people. And he never becomes Pollyanna-ish. He never sticks his head in the sand. He confronts that violence and that ugliness, but he has the audacity and the heart courage to sing about love. It is love that brought us here. It is love that sustains us here. And it is love that will take us home. And long after the generals who committed that onslaught, the names have been relegated to the dustbin of history, we remember and we sing the works of Rumi today. May it be the same way in our own age. May it be that long after the genocidal call of these madmen is forgotten, and that we as a human community evolve beyond it, that we remember what is good and beautiful. And I want to begin, if I may, with the good and the beautiful. I want to begin with a reminder of this ancient land, this beautiful land, the city of Shiraz, from my dear friend Fatemeh's hometown, the shrine of Hafez, the honeymoon capital of Iran. I want us to remember the city of Isfahan, where both of my parents were born, and I spent most summers of my childhood. A place which has been looked upon for centuries as one of the great pinnacles of art, architecture, and indeed beauty. This is a tradition that remembers that God is beautiful and God loves beauty. And so spaces are indeed made beautiful. And this is the town that I grew up in as a child and as a teenager, the city of Tehran, a large and cosmopolitan city that backs up to the majestic Alborz Mountains, a city the size of New York or Los Angeles, city of my childhood, which starting on March 1st ended up looking like this, with demonic clouds, some more than 16,000 bombing campaigns against a civilian population. This is not a war in Iran. It's a war on Iran. It's a war on Iranian people. On the very first day of this war, American bombs, American planes, paid for by American tax dollars, my dollars, your tax dollars, bombed the school, a girls' school in the city of Minab, killing 170 school-aged elementary school, middle school children. If you're watching the news, so much of the coverage is about the Strait of Hormuz. I joke with people that even Americans now can locate the Strait of Hormuz on a world map. We talk about 20% of the world's oil supply passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And the success, quote unquote, and failure of this military campaign. Every one of these bombs falls on somebody's baby. It doesn't matter where in the world the conflict is, Palestine, Lebanon, Minneapolis, Sudan, Congo, or Iran. It takes thousands and thousands of nights of parents staying up with their babies, nursing them, changing them, cleaning them, bathing them, loving them, hugging them, singing melodies to them. And it takes one instant for bad men to break hearts in ways that will never heal. That is fundamentally why I am opposed to war. Not just this war, war. We have to find a way as a human community of being better than this. We have to end war as a way that we relate to each other, or war is going to put an end to us all. About 10 days after the start of the war, this was the map of bombings in Iran. The American and Israeli government kept using the language of surgical strikes. We're only targeting the Iranian regime. This is a war against IRGC. Not true. Not true. This is what one building in Tehran looked like. You tell me if that looks like a surgical strike. What you saw here was repeated 19,000 times. 19,000 residential homes, 400 hospitals and clinics, and 600 schools have been bombed. Every one of these is a war crime. Why is it that for those of us who live in this country that we are lending our voice? Because that blood is on our hands. And it is fundamentally only we who have the power and the responsibility to stop this. The United Nations released a report that as of March 19th, a month ago, 67,000 civilian sites had been hit. This is from the United Nations. And of course, this pattern of complete disregard for human life is by now a familiar one. This is what was done in Gaza. This is what is being done in Lebanon right now. The Israelis are very open about the fact that Gaza was the prototype. And if we remained silent, which Sand did not, and you have my utmost admiration, respect, solidarity, and love. Once it was decided that the Israelis and the Americans could bomb and destroy with impunity, making a once thriving city look like this desolate post-apocalyptic landscape that's before you, then that's the same pattern that's now being repeated in Lebanon and Iran. So this is Gaza. And this is Lebanon. 1.5 million human beings have been displaced. The Israelis are occupying the southern part of Lebanon. And you might feel like, why are we talking about Lebanon and Palestine? I thought this was about Persian culture. Because our suffering is linked as our humanity is linked, and it is the same pattern, the same agents that are responsible for this death and destruction. You saw the school being bombed in Minab in Iran, same pattern as how the schools in Gaza and in Lebanon are bombed by the Israelis and the Americans. This is another home in Lebanon. You tell me if this looks like a surgical strike. The city of my childhood had its oil depots hit. A toxic black fume covered the city to the point that Time magazine said the air of Tehran was unfit for breathing. And we know that the health consequences of this will be with us for generations. The Americans and Israelis, I hesitate to use the pronoun we in speaking of these actions. The Americans and Israelis also have bombed universities, 31 to be exact, including Sharif University, which some people call the MIT of the Middle East. Extraordinary place for engineering and computer science. The Musical Institute that Mays was playing that beautiful and haunting melody from. And a cinema. A cinema. This is a war on humanity. It's a war on beauty. It's a war on art. It's a war on culture. It's a war on everything that makes life dear and precious. It's also a war on historical heritage sites. And this is the Golestan Palace, UNESCO World Heritage Site. These are not random or accidental. Already 6 years ago, President Trump had said that he had a list of 50 Iranian historic and cultural sites that he would love to bomb. Every single one of those actions, even the declaration, is a war crime. These heritage sites belong not only to Iranians, they're the heritage sites of humanity. And in the midst of what might feel like anger and rage, let's also remember that the people of Iran remember to laugh. There's some hilarious, snarky social media posts on Iran. Young women sitting together and saying like, the Americans are bombing our historic sites. You know, we would bomb their historic sites, except they don't have any. Except their history goes back 250 years. Our history goes back 5,000 years. And you can see that defiance. It's not exactly true that we don't have history here, but there's something about the spirit of that defiance. Of course, the genocidal words of our president of intending to destroy a whole civilization. And I'm going to pause this part and come back to what is it that the literary tradition, the spiritual tradition of Persia has to offer us at this very moment. And I don't want Trump to have the last word. I want music to have the last word. And if you're watching the material that the Iranians are able to put online before and after these bombings, sometimes at great cost to themselves, you see the outpouring of music again.
شور و سرمستی من جلوه کن در آسمان همچون
Now, let's come to where we are. One of the fundamental spiritual insights of the Persian spiritual tradition is to have your heart be where your feet are. We don't spiritually bypass. We don't evade. We sit in the midst of grief. We open up our hearts. We begin with a recognition that Rumi, Hazrat Maulana, he opens up the Masnavi, his masterpiece, not with a siren song of radical ecstatic love. He begins with pain. He begins with grief, because that's where we are. That's the state of our world. That's the state of our hearts. And that's where we also begin. Sine khaham sharh sharh as firaq. We actually long and yearn for a heart that has been cut open, because it's that open heart that will lead you to God. He says at one point, don't pray for water, pray for thirst. Your thirst will lead you to the water of life. The key is to learn to link together our suffering, our humanity, to the humanity of others. This way of pretending to live America first, Israel first, this is the pharaonic model of existence. This is the language of the pharaoh. Our way of existence is we're like trees, and trees linked together, their roots. We live together, we survive together, we thrive together. I want to read for you a short saying from an Iranian sage. I've just finished translating some of his sayings, Kharaqani, and he says the following. اگر از در ترکستان تا به در شام شخصی را پای در سنگ کوبد آن پای ابوالحسن است و اگر دردی در دلی است آن دل ابوالحسن است. If anywhere in the world, from the eastern Turkic lands to the Arab lands of the West, if anyone has a finger pierced by a thorn, their pain is my pain. If anyone stubs their toe on a stone, their hurt is my hurt. If there's any suffering in their heart and my heart are as one. So in a time where we find the world intensifying the divisions of race and nation, even religion, at its best, and I don't pretend that this is the only voice, but at its best, this Persian Islamic mystical tradition offers us a way, a poetry, a song, a melody, to recognize that as God is one, humanity also has to be one. What happens to one directly affects all indirectly. So you know this from the well-known saying of the Persian poet Sa'di. Iranians learn how to read and write by studying Sa'di. Human beings are like members of one body, created out of the same essence. When one member of the body feels pain, others remain distraught. You, unfeeling to the suffering of others, you might be unworthy of the name human. Almost all Iranians know these lines by heart. What is less frequently recognized is that Sa'di is only paraphrasing a statement of the Prophet Muhammad. That insight is at the very core of the teachings of the Chosen One, alayhi salatu wassalam. And again, there's humor, that resilience. In that same book, the Gulistan, the Rose Garden, there's a recognition that power is not always linked to love and is so frequently divorced from justice. So Sa'di tells the story of a tyrannical king who bears a striking resemblance to the tyrants of our own age. He says that there was a dervish, a mystic, who had come to Baghdad, and the tyrannical ruler of that place came to see him. And he comes to the dervish and says, say a nice prayer for me. Du'ai khayri bar man kun. And the Sufi's like, I don't think you really want me to. He's like, no, I'm the king, I insist. He's like, really, you wouldn't like it. He's like, I am the king, I command you. Goft Khudaya janash besitan. He said, God, kill him. And the king is like, what the hell kind of prayer was that? And he says, no, this is what is best. It is best for you to stop accumulating sins, and it liberates humanity from your tyranny. The very next story, there's an unjust king who goes to a sage and says, of all of my righteous acts of worship, which one is best? Which one is most pleasing to God? And this Persian sage says, Tura khobe nimruz, it's your afternoon siesta. Because at least when you're sleeping, you're not oppressing anyone. That's this powerful Persian tradition of speaking truth to power. Because what can a tyrant do to you? They can break your heart, yes. They can injure humanity, yes. But there's this recognition that the divine beloved is here and now present, and there and then present. Here we are with God, and there we will be with God. You have no power over us. So friends, I'm going to pause here and turn it over to my dear friend Fatemeh. I want to leave you with a note that I hope and trust is also helpful. You might be hearing some of these teachings. Surely you will think that after listening to Fatemeh's amazing and insightful words. And you might think to yourself, this sounds great, but what can I do? I'm just one person. And look at them. We say we don't have money for social services. Trump is talking about cutting Medicare and Medicaid. And he just asked for $200 billion additional dollars to fight this war and increase the military budget of the country to $1.5 trillion. What can I do? Well, here's what Maulana Rumi leaves you with. تو مگو همه به جنگند و ز صلح من چه آید تو یکی نی هزاری تو چراغ خود برافروز که یکی چراغ روشن ز هزار مرده بهتر. Don't say, everyone is at war. What good can come out of my peace? You are not one. You are not alone. You're 1,000. You are 1,000,000. There's 1,000,000 of us. چراغ خود برافروز. Light your own lamp. Light your own lamp. Light up the lamp of your heart. One lit lamp is better than 1,000 lightless ones. One person with a straight back, courageous and bold, is better than 1,000 bent over before injustice. So with your permission, friends, I will pause here and I will turn it over to my dear friend, Fatemeh Keshavarz.
Thank you, Omid. It was beautiful. I wanted to just listen and continue. So let me thank all the sand people here, all the lovely people who've gathered here and invited us to be a part of this gathering. This is what Rumi is actually about. ما صحبت یکدیگر گزینی بر دامن یکدیگر نشینی. We sit together and choose to be with each other. So if somebody said to me, what do you think of Rumi at the end of the day when you have, looked at so many different things and dealt with various aspects of this, academic and non-academic and all that, I would say togetherness. That is really the core, and that actually came out of some of the examples that Omid used. But let me add a little bit to the various important points that Omid made at the beginning of his conversations, which was about Iran. And I think the only thing I can think of that is probably important to be added there is that one thing that has happened to the Iranian people, even before the war and decades before the war, and possibly a reason for the war, is what you may call the invisibilization of the people of Iran. That could be a term. People have been made invisible. I promise you that many of us among our friends who love Iran, who love the poetry, even of Iranian origin themselves, don't know that today, and between Iranians of the age 15 to 25, 99% is the level of literacy. That is not a small achievement. People don't know that women are anywhere between 65 to 67% of the university students, that they do so well in sciences that it has become really something in the country. I remember there was a time that some of my friends in the Department of Physics, where I used to teach at Washington University in St. Louis, said, well, say something distinct about Iran. And I said, how many women professors you have in the Department of Physics? And there was only one. And I said, well, what I can tell you is that right now, the chair of the Department of Physics in Tehran University is a woman. And, these things are important because if you know you're dealing with people who care about these things, it's much harder to sit back and say, okay, I've even heard some people of Iranian origin saying, if they're bombed, it's better than living under the condition they're living in. No, No, you haven't been in a position where the ceiling is about to come down on your head. I remember I was in Iran during the Iran-Iraq war, and the sirens went out, and my grandmother was in her room, and I knew she wasn't able to run down in to the basement. So I ran to her room and I put my arm around her, and she was shaking. Then the next day, the same thing happened, and I was standing in our sitting room next to a friend of my sister who was probably an 18-year-old, and I put my arm around her, and she was shaking. And I just would like to tell these people, you don't know what an amazing people you are offering as sacrifice for getting the system you think that you could bring to place if we believed actually that wars could lead to some peaceful change. And then I was really shocked by the fact that some people said, oh, President Trump used some profanity on Easter Sunday. I mean, that's terrible. Of course, that's terrible. But somebody who is dreaming of killing people, that's what should really concern us. And just one more news that I heard from Iran right after the 12-day war. Do you know what happened in Tehran the night after? People staged a play in the town hall, in the major theater building, and hundreds of people came there, sat down and watched the play. Just a play, not even about the war, just to connect with each other through art. And that brings us to language and to poetry. Many people know that Iranian cinema is thriving. Well, it's deeply indebted to Persian poetry. Not only people like Kiarostami, but many, many others. Theater is the same. And I think that I absolutely agree with what Omid was saying. There are things there that totally impossible to destroy. This nation, these people are connected. While, of course, it's really hard to get the volume of what our master poets, which, as Omid said, we are not claiming that there are not any other cultures or other places, but these people who are speaking to us, they really seas, oceans of knowledge and wisdom. And Rumi says, گر بریزی بحر را در کوزه‌ای چند گنجد قسمت یک روزه‌ای. If you want to pour the sea into a little jug, which is your being, you can only take as much as one day. But that one day could, of course, be life-giving. Why is it? And that brings me to another important point. People have a right to say, poetry at this point, what's the connection of poetry with, you are in danger, you have to look for some place to hide. No. Poetry is like the Silk Road of the imagination. It keeps Persian speakers connected together, no matter where they are. And just as on the Silk Road, these amazing things traveled, so did the voices of these poets that kept people connected, basically protecting them from loneliness and depression and feeling uncared for in these, moments of cruelty and carelessness and openly saying, well, maybe we shouldn't fight this war because we can't win it. What does that mean? So if we can win a war, we fight a war. So this poetry gives people hope and a sense of play. It's very interesting because at one level, it's absolutely serious. It's that ocean. At another level, at the same time, it's a laughter. Like when Omid played the music there, no, I think it was actually Mice who played the musician playing in two musicians playing there. It was very interesting because I had picked these lines from Rumi. Rumi says, روز باران است و ما جو میکنیم بر امید عشق دستی میزنیم. He says, it is a rainy day. I am digging a canal. And in the hope of love and union, I clap my hands. تو نگو مطرب نیم دستی بزن تو بیا ما خود تو را مطرب کنیم. He says, don't say I don't know how to play. You just clap your hands. Come here, I'll turn you into a musician. And then this, I love this line. The clouds are pregnant with drops from the sea of love. ابرها آبستن دریای عشق. ما ز ابر عشق خود آبستنی. So here's a man in 13th century who says, I'm pregnant with love, which drops from the sea of love. Why? Because there is hope in there, there's play in there. And he's basically saying, life is not about standing on the corner and philosophizing. Come in, come whirl with me. That's life. Come live it. And very likely this is a very important part of the message that Shams gave him, that you have all these knowledge. Now live it. Now, I think obviously Rumi had it in himself, otherwise Shams would have not gone to him. Because he says, I find great people and angosht bar rag ishan mi nahem. Shams says, I go only to people who can take what I give them. But bringing it into life means keeping hope alive. Hope that when you get up tomorrow, there are some good things you can do, and some bad things you can prevent, and some enjoyable things. He doesn't want you to sit in a corner and suffer. He says, my bread is like, that's actually his bread. My poetry is like Egyptian bread. Eat it when it's fresh, which is also a great comment about the context. Understand the time of the poetry, the freshness of the connection of the poetry, but also enjoy it. Enjoy it. And I have never seen a poet, or maybe not many, that are so generous with what they give people. It's like, I'm writing it, I'm saying it. When it goes, it's yours. And then what is that he's doing? He says, خود از کف دست من مرغان عجب رویم. می از لب من جوشد در مستی آن حالت. Wondrous birds grow from the palm of my hands, and wine gushes forth from my lips in the intoxication of that moment. So these wondrous birds are his poetry, fly. What are birds? Alive. They live beyond the person who created them. They're colorful. They sing. They can come to you. They can be close to you. But above all, he's creating them from the palm of his hands. Who's doing that? Who creates birds from the palm of his hands? Magicians. In other words, take make-believe seriously. Dream your life, make it a make-believe, and then make it come to life, like these birds that I am giving you. And I think another one of his great reasons why people feel close to him is that he is, he's not separating body and the soul, the body and the soul. He's like, we are one. هر که ز هو پرسدد رخ بنما که همچنین. هر که ز ما پرسدد بام برا که همچنین. If anyone asks you about Houris, show them your face. Say it like this. If anyone said, how does the moon climb up and rise? Says, go up on the roof. Say like this. And he goes on to say, if anyone asks you how the clouds uncover the moon, just undo the front of your robe, knot by knot, say like this. And then at the end he says, if God asks you what you want, say that در کف هر یکی بنه شمع صفا که همچنین. Give us a candle of purity. Safa. Because if you have that, you do things that are right. You do things for the right reason. You prevent doing this for the right reasons, not because people are going to admire you and say you are a good person. And there is the other, of course, magic of Rumi is not only he says, Omid Sararauh, he says, hope is the beginning of the road to safety, but and gives us hope. But he does it in such simple words, accessible words. There is a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but it, like many other stories about these great people, it teaches a lot. They say that Rumi is visiting Sadruddin Ghunavi, another great mystic of this time, and they want to pray together when they go there. And then Sadruddin says, Hazrat Khudavandgar, there is this young man here that keeps asking me questions, and I keep explaining, and I keep bringing examples, and the next day he comes back and he's asking the same questions. Can you please talk to him? So Rumi goes and they talk for a few minutes, and the guy says, thank you so much, and leaves. So Ghunavi says, I wonder how you make these very complicated things so simple. Rumi says, no, I wonder how you make such simple things so complicated. So one of his lessons is live your life simply together with other human beings with purity of intention, and that's all you need to do. And by the way, he tells us that we can't pour the ocean into a jug, but I'm going to give you a rubai, a quatrain in which Rumi pours the entire ocean to one jug. And that's the story of his spiritual journey. He says, در بحر صفا گداختم همچون نمک. نه کفر و نه ایمان، نه یقین ماند و نه شک. اندر دل من ستاره‌ای پیدا شد. گم گشت در آن ستاره هر هفت فلک. I melted in the sea of purity, like salt. Nothing remained, neither faith, nor disbelief, nor doubt, nor certainty. So it spreads out into the ocean of life. And در دل من ستاره‌ای پیدا شد. a star appeared in the center of my being. گم گشت در آن ستاره هر هفت فلک. The entire 7 spheres drowned, got lost in that one star. So he goes out there. He melts in the sea of purity, comes back, and takes the entire universe in. And that way he's saying, this is who you are, people. Don't sell that cheap. Don't give it to violence. Don't give it to war. Don't give it to lies. Don't give it to self-worship. Live it purely, and you will have it all. So with that, I really am hoping that we could keep these words with ourselves. Because Rumi says, من آن جسم نیستم که در نظر شما منظور کشتم. He says, I'm not that body sitting in front of you. I am the joy that you feel when you hear my words. If you feel that, celebrate that moment because I am with you. So let's keep his words close. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Khayli Mamnoon, Meet John and Fatima John. So right now we're gonna, I wanna invite the audience to put questions, if you have any questions, into the Q&A, and we will have a conversation. And I will begin with a question about language and how, I suppose one of the brutal effects of war is the corruption of language. So words like security and democracy and civilization and collateral damage. And in the word of the President of the United States about asking people to rise up for democracy, people of Iran. So I'm wondering, how do you make sense of that? And how can poetry help us insist to hold on, to restore the truth to language, and to insist to not allow language to be degraded?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Well, I think that generally speaking, we are speaking beings, so we have these huge concepts that we want to fit into one word. And quite apart from what the word does, which we will get to, the language reifies these concepts for us. Even when we say change is good, change is reified to a thing, but change is in fact not a thing. It's a collection of dynamic states and going from one to the other. So the language to begin with, I was in a conference yesterday about remembering historical violence. And that's one of the things that occurred to me, and, at some point I talked about, is that atrocities, we say atrocities, at some point it just really reifies the whole striking concept into something that's almost detached from its meaning. Now, when war comes and when politics takes over language and tries to use it. I mean, the war on terror, think of that. The democracy, all of that these words are so contaminated that it is no longer really have any meaning except for what the intention of the speaker is to generalize. And what poetry does, and also speech that's poetic, it may even not be poetry as such, but when it's poetic speech, it invites you in to the layers of meaning. It asks you to visualize things. You know, when you, for example, talk about the kindness of one person to another, or the harm that one person does to another, visually, it breaks out of that reified context and shows you the actual thing. So I leave it at this, but I think poetic language does away with overused words. Poets always refresh words or find new ones. And they always avoid what is overused and that can go away, but they also put them together. And just like when you put ingredients in a dish, they give their taste to each other. They empower each other. So the word khosh that Hafez makes use of becomes this amazing concept of joy because he has planted it in this ghazal that gives all of its poetic energy to this word. So language, when we connect through language that's honest, that's vibrant, that's poetic, we do away with what has lost its meaning. And you're right, one of the harmless aspects of what's going on in our lives now in the world is what war and violence does to language, particularly that we live in the age of social media and things are like poof out there and with the push of one button.
I might follow up and add a couple of words as well. It's a good thing that a lot of us were raised to read books like Animal Farm and 1984, which, by the way, I read in Iran, in Persian.
Yeah.
I didn't need to come to the US to read them, but they warn us about how there's the Ministry of Truth that's going to come and introduce its whole vocabulary. Let's just say that the president of these United States has a somewhat allergic relationship with facts and truth, and you can just see it if you watch his account. And there was one question in the Q&A about what do we do when President Trump calls on the people of Iran to rise up and establish a democracy. I think allowing for the fact that many Iranians have deeply divided views on the legitimacy and the policies of the Islamic Republic. Sure. But let's look at President Trump's call for establishing a democracy in Iran and ask the simple question: is this mad king someone that has any track record of supporting democracy here in America? Forget Iran for a second. Think about what does democracy entail? Representation and voting rights. And they're doing everything that they can to roll back voting. They have gutted civil rights legislation that we fought for in 1964. People gave blood, and they're rolling back that legislation. Media, fair and accurate, transparent reporting. This week alone, our buffoonish, clownish, drunk frat boy, Pete Hegseth, is calling the media Pharisees. And the president has called members of the media enemies of the state. Is this someone who's interested in democracy when the most right-wing factions of American society and the most right-wing factions of Israeli society say, oh, we're really worried about the fact that young people are getting their information about what's actually happening on the ground from social media, then they specifically identify, Netanyahu did so in DC, we have to buy TikTok. And they did. Ellison family came and they bought it. And in the same way that Facebook and Instagram oftentimes shadow ban people, we see that being done. The judiciary, to have a functioning judiciary, is a necessary component of a democratic exercise. This was the first time, maybe in American history, that a sitting American president attended the session of a Supreme Court. Surely an intimidating gesture when he has a record of calling the judiciary enemies of the state. Is this someone who's an advocate of democracy? And if you want democracy in Iran, which I do, I would love to see that, then take a look at a president who unleashes a militia called ICE, which is beholden not to law, but only to him, has a military budget that is larger than all but 7 countries around the world, on Minneapolis. Right? This is not a pro-democracy activist. And as someone who has gutted democracy here at home and has allied himself with the most right-wing governments around the world, what position is he? Is he in to be taken seriously and with credibility when it comes to wishing so-called democracy on Iran or on any other country around the world?
And Omid, sorry, did you finish?
Yep.
Yeah, because I think that he's saying very openly that he's interested in Iranian oil. He just said it, you know, so there's not, we don't even have to try to guess. But also, Iran, after the Iraq War, which was an 8-year period that prevented really the country from focusing on anything but handling the war, had a period of trying to rebuild, then got a president that did that, and then we got President Khatami, and and then for a number of years things changed dramatically. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't absolutely ideal. There were some undemocratic things that happened, particularly to some student movements, but it was going in that direction. The Iranian economy was growing, the Iranian education, and that's when, by the way, that literacy increased very dramatically in the country. Well, what does the United States do? What does George W. do? Call him a member of the axis of evil, and then the beginning of the sanctions. If anybody wants democracy for Iran, I would say lift the sanctions. Let the people live a life in which they don't have to have their thought 90%, 99% on putting bread on the table for their family, so that man and woman and children all can think about some other things in life. So, I think it is the point that Omid is making is very, very deep. I mean, look at this person and the relationship this president has with democracy, and then you'll have your answer.
Yeah.
So, Fatemeh Jan, I've been thinking about this notion of remembrance. I mean, so much of your work, Jasmine and Stars, for example, among others, insist on the depth and humanity of Persian literary tradition against flattening a narrative. So in thinking about remembrance, and when there is violence across generation and remembrance beyond the neuroscience, remembrance becomes more than a memory, in a way it becomes refusal, which is what you're asking us. In one of the lectures I saw, you were inviting the audience to not put these books of poetry on the shelves, but to live with them and through them. How do you understand remembrance as an ethical act? especially in places when or where history is constantly being distorted, denied, and even rewritten.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I think that above all of these, like a horizon above all of this, is the Quranic voice that calls itself a remembrance. هذا ذكر. So it doesn't say, well, there are things like the light of the heaven and the earth and so forth, but the Quran itself says this more than once. And I think in there is a deep message of you as a member of the human community are given this particular extraordinary ability to remember things that are deeply buried in your being, in your psyche, and kind of you're not so that you're not drifting in places back and forth. So for someone who can have an anchor like the Quran, obviously, that I would say holding on to Quran, not as a book of law, which could be on another level, but as a remembrance. And Rumi, even says that when people say that that the Quran is given to humanity, نحن نزلنا الذكر ونحن له لحافظون, that we will protect it, even then, God means, he says, yes, you can say, مفسران گفتند این در حق قرآن است, in Nikus. He says, well, some commentators say that this is about the Quran, that we have given you هذا الذكر, and now you have it, we will protect it. He says, it is not that. That could be it, okay? But what he really means is that I have placed in you a power to remember, a remembrance that I am going to protect. So if you have that, and then you see he uses the Quran to say people, not Muslims, not just anybody, but the people. I've given you this gift. And so once you begin to think about that, this could be the core of what you hang on to, could be a person. In Jasmine and Stars, I have an uncle that, my uncle, the painter, he was the biggest source of stability and deep thinking in my life. Okay, you can hold on to that. Then you have to be aware of the fact that violence is like physical attack. It harms you. And you have to find ways of taking care of yourself. You have to look for places in which people you trust, people who can, who know, and begin to work on these wounds inside so that you can overcome and heal the ones that, hurt you, and hold on to the ones that can liberate you and allow you to grow beyond that. And that's easier said than done, of course, but I think it is. Art is one way. Some people do this with music. People do that with poetry. I have a son who was born in the United States, now is in Spain, usually lives in Italy, but every once in a while he calls me and he texts me and says, Mom, we have to read Ghazal of Sadi. I'm not feeling well. And, of course, he studied Persian, but not all my children can read Sadi. But it's for him to bring balance and stability back to life. And people have to find that anchor, have to find and work with togetherness with others, and also be aware. Memories are also constructed for us to control us. Yesterday, it's very interesting that I was in this conference yesterday, remembering historical violence. People, one after the other, from Nicaragua, from Spain, from Korea, from Vietnam, from, Cuba, they talked about memories constructed for them to envision themselves in that particular way. And, how to free themselves from that is also an achievement. But again, the culture can give you, I think, the sources.
Thank you. I want to go to Omid John and kind of like give you a chance to also talk about this notion of memory and remembrance. I've had the pleasure, the delight to travel with Omid John on his illuminated tours, and that just have this perfect blend of history, poetry, remembrance. We have these dhikr remembrance, dhikr circles, and also to the refusal to forget. So my question to you, Omid John, is, in this time of bombardment and displacement and humiliation and pain, how do you speak? You continue to speak about love without sounding naive. You don't. About remembrance without falling into helplessness, and justice while preserving the kind of the liveness of the heart.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mace John. And one of the really great joys and blessings of my life has been to not just have my heart expanded through these friendships, but to have my family expanded. And you've become family to me and to my wife and my children. And so has your whole family have become dear to us. This was a question that also came up in the Q&A, which was, someone had posted about having been raised without these teachings, without this kind of poetry perfuming their life, and feeling a sense of dislocation and being cut off. I think she used the word ashamed about it. And, of course, there are many beautiful parts to Persian culture, and shame is one of the less beautiful parts of our culture as well. And one of the things that I oftentimes remind people is that of the many divine qualities, the beautiful names of God, the shaming is not one of them. God has a lot of qualities, but the way that God pulls us towards himself, is through love, through attraction, through jazb, through yearning and longing and thirst, not by making us feel like crap. And what I mentioned to that friend in the Q&A was that, nowadays therapists and counselors sometimes talk about, and I know, Maze, you do a lot of work on this, intergenerational trauma. Right? That trauma is something that is passed on for generations. Part of being a person of hope and a people of hope and a community of hope is that if trauma can be passed on for generations, so can love, so can beauty, so can light, so can that yearning and longing for God. And I actually choose to believe that we are fundamentally made in the image of a loving and merciful God. We're not fundamentally broken or created broken. We're made whole wholeness is our home. Wholeness, in a real sense, is our birthright. And it is always possible to find one's way back to these kinds of teachings, but these seeds are planted deep in each one of our hearts. They have to be nurtured. They have to be watered. Reading, Fatemeh Jan's wonderful books would be a wonderful start. I would be honored to have any of the friends join us on any of the programs that friends put in the chat, in Turkey and Morocco and elsewhere. And the goal, the aspiration, the longing, and this is a lifelong calling, is that at some point we're not reading about other people's experience. That's the thing about poetry. It's not just about reading about other people who have wondrous birds coming out of their hands. It's what's coming out of your hand. What beauty is flowing out of your heart? What springs of light and wisdom are emerging from you? The great Persian Sufi Abu Sa'id, he had a helper named Abdul Karim who used to just run to the notebook and write down the stuff that Abu Sa'id was saying. And at some point, Abu Sa'id says to him, "Hekayat nevis mabosh, chenan bosh ke az to hekayat konand." Don't just write down stories. Become somebody that others would want to write down what you say. And that fountain is open in each one of our hearts. It's never too late. It's never too late. And do so not out of a sense of shame or guilt. Do it for love. Because love begets love. Love is divine, and it will summon you back home.
So much gratitude to both of you. I want to just say a couple of things, and then I will hand it over to my colleagues at SAND. So we will be sending resources and along with the recordings. In the chat, there has been resources about the offerings that both Professor Fatemeh and Omid offer, the tours, the books, the articles, the video on YouTube, which are remarkable. And I'm going to, I think we have we're at a time here. So I thank you very much for joining us, for this just remarkable, just washes over me over and over these insights that you've shared with us. And back to you, Zaya and Maurizio.
Thank you.
Wow, my heart is full and stretched and tender with so many gifts you shared with us to walk with, to be with, to remember. So very, very grateful.
Love is intergenerational.
Love is in
Love
so
and beauty
many.
is intergenerational.
Yes, to light our lamps and remember our togetherness. Yeah, we're here in one body. Yeah. Thank you so much. We will continue to walk together, to listen and to learn with each other. So lots was shared. We will share the recordings. And I just also want to invite our community. We have another conversation next Sunday, the same time, and we'll be in solidarity with Lebanon, so with Voices from Lebanon. Please join us the same time on Sunday. Maze, Fatima, Omid, deep bow and gratitude. And Omid, I'm truly hopeful one day to join you and journey with you to those ancient lands so my body can remember. So,
I mean, that's the best thing when you get to see dear ancient friends for the first time in body.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And thank you so much to our SEN team for all your care and beautiful work. You make this possible. Lisa, Carlos, Sarah, Jean-Ric, Amber, Alexis. Thank you.
And many more.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm personally very grateful for
Thank you,
having been
Fatemeh.
included in this. Thank you, Omid John. Thank you for connected me with these beautiful people. Thank you.